Good morning. Nice to see you again. If everyone could take their seats, we'll get started here. We've got an exciting lineup for you. I hope that you all have a chance to check out the handouts. We've sort of distributed them around on the table. And as I said earlier, this is what we call speed scholarship, similar to speed dating. So we're going to have each presenter come up and give us a 10-minute summary of the kind of scholarship and the sort of thing that they've been doing this past academic year. And then we'll move immediately to the next person. They'll introduce themselves, that sort of thing. So if you have a very pressing question, you want to get that in quickly. You may have time for one or two questions, but in general, we're going to move fairly quickly. Our first presenter this morning, and I will introduce her as Anna Raskin, Associate Professor of History, and we'll ask her to come up and get us started. So.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to my presentation. I'll try to be brief, 10 minutes. Hopefully, I'll make it in 10 minutes. In April 2016, I presented a paper titled Teachers and Their Work in the Voluntary Associations of Eastern Siberian Cities in the late 19th century at the Midwest Slavic Conference at Ohio State University in Columbus. My paper analyzed the contribution that teaching intelligentsia made to the growth of educational associations and the public sphere in Eastern Siberia in the late 19th century of the Russian Empire. I'm planning to expand this paper into the article for the Russian Historical Journal, which I'll be writing this summer. I'll also apply the finding from this research to deepen the content of the Russian history course I teach here. I'll add an additional topic which analyzes the emergence of civil society in Russia through the work of multiple voluntary associations established and run by teaching intelligentsia in the regions and the capital. Specifically, students will learn how the numerous associations created by teachers in Siberia advanced social reform and science in the regions and created a rich public sphere which served as an impetus for the emergence of civil society in Russian Empire. This approach will enrich the content of my course and will help students to confront the stereotypical notion promoted in historical literature in the past that the Russian Empire was a highly centralized, expansionist state verging on despotic, with a total absence of democratic institutions and little to no room for initiative below. This vision of Russia as a centralized despotic state came from a long-standing tradition in American scholarship that disregarded the studying of the Russian periphery and remained oblivious to the concepts of geographical space and the spatial dimensions of the historical events. By disregarding the regional history, the historians have created a one-sided, generalized, homogenized perspective of Russian Empire that lacks depth and originality. This approach began to change about 15 years ago when the American literature developed somewhat an obsession with problems of empire, which resulted in a vast scholarship with the focus on regional and local studies. However, it usually focused on borderlands of Russian Empire and so-called non-Russian nationalities residing there. In Russia itself, new historiographical development began taking place, where historians, myself included, began researching the regional history and placing it in a larger historical context that helps us to create a revised version of the country itself. Eastern Siberian cities in the late 19th century witnessed a large increase in the growth of voluntary associations, ranging from educational, technical, agricultural, geographical societies to sports and leisure clubs. By 1897, there were more than 30 actively functioning associations and clubs in Irkutsk, Krasnoyarsk, and Chita, which were the largest cities of Eastern Siberia. The teaching professionals, actually teachers of private and public schools, played an instrumental role in the founding and functioning of multiple educational associations designed to raise financial aid for students, expand access to education and vocational training, create new forms of leisure and advance science in the region. There were several reasons why Siberian teachers engaged into the creation work of the voluntary associations. The second half of the 19th century was a time of fundamental changes in the Russian Empire. And teachers hoped that through public service and collaboration with local administrators, they could soften the autocratic policies of the Tsarist state and bring an era of progressive civic life into the Siberian cities. By raising the educational and cultural level of general public, the teaching intelligentsia fought the conventional notion of a Siberian backwardness and work collectively to build a progressive and modern society in the Russian Empire. Teachers also raised public awareness of such issues as schools' heavy workloads, poor working conditions, and low wages. Sounds familiar, right? Finally, the teaching professionals of Siberian cities strived for public recognition of their talents and expertise, which they saw readily extended to the community. By the last quarter of the 19th century, the Russian government came to recognize and rely on such associations to provide education, rational leisure, medical care, and infrastructure to the residents of remote regions, which were desperately lacking funds. The government, which was unwilling to change the foundation of its autocratic rule, nevertheless allowed great degree of autonomy for the multitude of urban associations working towards national improvement and modernization. With the help of local press, publicizing the work of the voluntary associations, their general membership grew tremendously. I'll give you one example. In 1898, the membership of Irkutsk Society to provide financial aid to students of Eastern Siberia stood at 662 people, including 101 teachers, 20 medical doctors, and several local administrators, all of whom made up the active core of the organization. This association raised money for scholarships, for hundreds of rubles, for scholarships, which was a lot of money, opened up numerous libraries, opened up several Sunday schools, and organized educational entertainment for the masses, such as public readings, lectures, and concerts. For the longest time, Siberian people complained there was lack of rational leisure. All people did was drinking and brawling and doing all kinds of unsavory activities. Here comes the teachers who give them public readings, lectures, concerts, musical events. Similar associations led by Siberian intelligentsia emerged in most of the provincial and central regions of Russian Empire. In the late 1870s, the Society to provide financial aid for the students of Eastern Siberia also organized professional gatherings for the elementary school teachers. The topics of discussions were centered on living and working conditions, quality of teaching, parental involvement. There were complaints that parents don't participate much in their children's activities. And this is 19th century. And the importance of female education in Siberia. For the longest time, the congresses of the elementary school teachers were not regulated by the government. It was only in 1899, literally 2 decades later, when government finally issued a temporary rules pertaining to the congresses of the public elementary schools. So the government was very lax and congresses just run themselves. In the beginning of the 20th century, the regional and central congresses of teachers of elementary and secondary schools became an important part of the Russian liberal movement, providing a peaceful civil alternative to the growing political radicalism. The central and local administrators, while initially suspicious of the Congress activities, gradually came to support them. For example, in 1889, an inspector of Irkutsk elementary schools publicly praised the work of congresses, referring to the participants as the, quote, new teachers who diligently carry their civic duties and obligations to serve local community, end of quote. This research presents a more complicated structure of the late 19th century Russian Empire that contradicts the traditional vision of Russian state as highly centralized despotic state. There was a productive interaction between the central initiative and local response. The local intelligentsia enjoyed a great degree of autonomy due to the relatively vague Tsarist legislation, which allowed great room for interpretation and action. Although the Siberian cities did not have zemstva and therefore could not participate in elections, they had large amount of control over local management of education and cultural affairs. In this respect, the Russian state of the late 19th century was remarkably decentralized and was moving towards relatively healthy relations between the center and the provinces. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Terry Sullivan. I teach office management in our business division, and for the past 2 years, I've been serving as Provost Faculty Fellow with a focus on our adult learners here at the college. So kind of the very beginning of my journey, one of the first pieces of research and resource that I reached out to was CALE. CALE is the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, and anyone who might be in the room here today or has viewed any of the kind of on-demand training that we put out, our adult learner workshops with our focus on PLA, you'll remember that the focus and the foundation of our PLA workshops was some good work from CALE, emphasizing the connection that PLA has for adult learners in supporting them in degree completion. Those adults who pursue PLA have higher completion rates, are able to complete at a reduced cost, and are able to complete quicker. So CALE is kind of near and dear to my heart, both from a research perspective as well as just conference and overall professional development. I had some encouragement to pursue an opportunity to write an article for CALE, and gosh, I'm nervous, but I would say anyone in the room, if you haven't done something like this, push yourself and challenge yourself to do so. My other suggestion would be to find a partner in crime. My partner in crime was Denise Collins. Denise is serving as our project manager for the TACT 2 grant, and being able to work collaboratively with a colleague on an article was a really important piece for me, especially when you're kind of taking that first step. It was nice to have a partner in crime. So we submitted, and our proposal was accepted for CALE's Forum and News for 2015, and it actually came out in January 2016, and the focus of that edition was Advising the Adult Learner, Volume 1. So our article that we wrote together was titled PLA Advising for Pennsylvania Community College Students, a Statewide Platform Approach. So some of you maybe paid attention to some of the workshops that we've done in the past. We have a statewide platform, technology platform for PLA. All of the community colleges throughout the state kind of came together as part of the TACT 2 grant and agreed upon technology, but also common language, cost, policies, process. So this wasn't necessarily research. I would call it more a case study or a showcase. So what we talked about in the article was the what behind it. What is PLA? It includes transfer credit, industry certifications, military training, any corporate training that adults have gone through, and finally exams. So even AP exams or CLEP exams are considered PLA. The why behind it, I'm going to pull out my notes here. So there's kind of national statistics at kind of the macro level that by 2020, 65% of jobs in the country will require a college degree. And we have 30 million adults with some college but no degree. So they have some college credit but no degree. So how can we kind of fill that skills gap and respect the fact that not all learning occurs in a traditional classroom, and support them with the completion, the progression, and kind of respecting the good work that they've been doing professionally and even on a volunteer basis. So if you recall, some of the workshops that we've done, we usually start off by saying, this isn't anything new. The college, the institution as a whole, we've been doing PLA for quite some time, but there's some hurdles, and there's some whys here. So in the past, now I'm dating, going back a couple of years here, in the past, if a faculty was reviewing a portfolio, it was a binder, right? And perhaps you needed to divvy it up. I'd say some other hurdles is just education, educating the student on what are the different options that are available to you, educating them on the process, and then finally, something that was often occurring in the past were multiple points of contact. So, okay, well, if you want to do PLA, you have to talk to this person, and then if you want to see it for this class, you have to talk to this person. So that was one of the hurdles that, as a group, the project wanted to address, to simplify that and to make it more clear for the students. So the how piece of this was really all of the community colleges coming together to agree on some common kind of ground rules, because each of the institutions were doing things differently, as you can imagine. So the approach, I would say, was a two-piece approach. And sometimes I think it's easy to focus on one and not the other. The approach is, you can look at that thing, you can look at the website, the technology platform, CC Fast Track, and say, oh, that's it. No, that's one piece of it. The CC Fast Track allows any student to register on the site, create a profile, select their home institution, so that, Montgomery County Community College, that's where I envision myself going there. Look through the portfolio of courses, identify the course that meets their background, and kind of that gut check, yeah, I think I might be able to challenge that class. That process piece triggers to an internal, one centralized person, Mary Beth Briers here at our institution, but that single point of contact. And that's the important piece where the advising really happens, to have some conversations and learn more about, well, you think that you might be able to challenge this course. Tell me more about your background. Tell me more about what certifications, what documentation you have, because we want to set you up for success. We don't want you to move forward in this process if you're not ready and you don't have that true documentation. Because I would say that that's one other piece of this. Out in the media, you might see commercials, earn credit for relevant experience, right? And it's a real education process to say, how exactly can you demonstrate the learning outcomes of the course? You need to find those, maybe you went through training in the past, but you need to prove it. So going through that education process and advising the student on the different options that are available for PLA, as the list that I mentioned before. So the implications, I would say, not just locally at our own institution, but throughout the state and then also throughout the country. Coming up with that common lexicon, because some institutions were calling it credit for life experience, others were saying prior learning experience. So coming up with that common lexicon, coming up with that list of, while some institutions weren't necessarily honoring certifications or they weren't necessarily doing portfolios, and simply saying, oh, we'll transfer credit. We do PLA. This allowed kind of that full suite of options to be accepted across all of the community colleges. The process, starting with the technology platform, but also giving that ownership to each of the community colleges to say, you have the platform, how can you implement it to make it work at your own institution? Policies, and then cost. Think about that. For 14 community colleges to come up with and agree upon a common cost of $129 for portfolio evaluation was no small feat. So that increased awareness overall. I think others started looking at the statewide platform as a model. Other states were looking at it as a model to say, this might be a way in which we can implement portfolio evaluation and PLA review. So I'd welcome questions, but I'd love for you to continue the conversation if you have future topics that you'd like us to emphasize for adult learner workshops. If you are curious about how this might fit for your discipline, I welcome the conversation. I tweet on the topics of competency-based education, adult learners, and prior learning assessment, so continue the conversation electronically as well. Thanks.
Hello. I'm Natasha Patterson, Assistant Professor of Public Health. So I am going to present on couple things, but I first wanted to just highlight the goal when we are filling out the form to do faculty development and to have funding to go to work on different projects and go to conferences. One of the things we have to focus on is how this event will impact our teaching and how we'll use it in our teaching. So I'm going to be highlighting that as I go over the different activities that I participated in. So the highlights I wanted to present you with today is a journal publication that was published January 2016, the City Council hearing where I testified on the health impacts of lead poisoning prevention, and the Pennsylvania Public Health Association conference that I attended. So first, I drafted an article and submitted it for publication in October, and I woke up on January 5th, which is my birthday, and got an email that said it was published. So the publication date is January 25th, 2016, so that's kind of cool, huh? The article is in the Journal of Physical Education, and I'm drawing a blank on the R. Recreation and Dance. I'm sorry. Joe Purd is the journal that it was published in, and the title is Preparing High School Students for Careers in Public Health, Health Education, and Physical Education Fields. The message basically focused on the promotion of health and wellness in students, in addition to increasing students who pursue STEM careers, and including health education and health and physical education when we talk about the S in STEM. So health and physical education classes are great opportunities to promote the science of disease investigation, prevention, and health promotion through exercise, teaching students about the human body and all of its factors in health class and in gym class. And students choose majors, so as we work with high school students in transitioning to the college level, we do a lot of promotion at that high school level, so it's interesting to know how students choose their majors. So, of course, they choose their majors by what they're exposed to. So what we want to do is increase their exposure, increase the options and the different fields that they are exposed to. Of course, they're going to want to choose careers that their parents take on, or their family members and who they see on a day-to-day basis, teachers, advisors, and things like that. So we want to use that as an opportunity to expose students to different careers. And health and phys ed programs are one of the programs that usually get cut or kind of lessened due to budget, due to testing, preparing students to take standardized testing. So looking at these opportunities and helping to kind of work with the gym teachers, the phys ed teachers, the health teachers to help them expand what they cover in class to include opportunities for them to talk to them about their career, you know, being a physical education teacher and being a health teacher, and then some of the other health careers that they may be able to do. And when I talked about the S in STEM, so the S in STEM is science, so it's science, technology, engineering, and math. So most people, when they think about the science part of it, they're thinking about the hard sciences, and those are included in public health. So public health is a science. The public health is a science of protecting and improving the health of families, communities, through promotion of healthy lifestyles, research for disease and injury prevention, and the detection and control of disease, of infectious disease. Health education is the behavioral science, providing evidence-based information, teaching skills meant to improve health by creating, implementing, and evaluating behavioral health interventions. And physical education is an exercise science, evidence-based teaching, educating students on the human body and movement, injury prevention, conditioning the body, and that includes biology, nutrition, and exercise. So considering all of these different ways that we can teach students and different ways that we can give students opportunities to find out about these fields and how we can expand just their exposure to the different fields. So that's pretty much what the article was about, and I made some recommendations on how we can can do that. So public health and health and physical education programs can partner and demonstrate to students the ways that they can diversify their career options. And some suggestions were mentoring between teachers and mentoring with outside organizations that have different programs that students can work with those professionals in that field and be able to learn what they do, learn some of the pros and cons of that career, and then when they get to that level of having to choose a major, they'll be more informed. Service learning projects, most high schools require service learning hours, so incorporating some health and wellness and public health opportunities in the organizations that students partner with to have students do their service learning projects with these organizations would be helpful to this cause. And then also the dual enrollment where students are enrolled in college credits as well as their high school, having them take classes like nutrition, introduction to public health, kinesiology, and classes like that to expose them to the information earlier so that when they do get to college, they'll have a lot more under their belt and they'll be able to make a more informed decision. So that was the article, and hopefully it will help to inform, and I will definitely be using the information when I reach out to high schools to do recruitment and things like that to help and partner and collaborate with the teachers in that area to help their students. The next thing is the health impacts of lead in the water. So I was asked, and a Drexel professor of public health was asked to testify at a hearing in March for the Philadelphia City Council. The water department, the health department were involved in this, in seeing who is responsible for correcting the lead problem, and basically my input was just the health effects, and I just wanted to share how far and wide this reaches. So I know most people know about the national news of Flint, Michigan, and the water, lead in the water, but many are not aware of how close it is to us and how we're being impacted as well, and our children are being impacted as well. So Flint, Michigan's average lead level was 3.2, but Norristown's lead level is 11.8. And that's just the children who are tested. Daycare centers, the water is not tested at daycare centers. There's no regulations for that. There was recently a shutdown of the water fountains at a Lower Marion Elementary School because of their fear. But one of the things that we had to point out at the hearing, and that I'll point out now, is that in certain areas, you're able to, there's a budget for certain counties, there, in cities, there's budgets, and they can go to a budget, they can put a proposal in and say, this is how we can alleviate the situation, and they pay for it, and then it's alleviated. So the water fountains are back on in that Lower Marion Elementary School. So that didn't take long to remedy at all because there's a money factor. So in areas of poverty, in areas where there isn't a budget to remedy the situation, a lot of times the devastation lasts a lot longer, and there's an impact on children and how they're learning, brain development, especially children, if they're exposed before age 6, they are impacted a great deal. And if you're exposed over a long period of time, it doesn't matter how much lead, it's over time. It could be a little bit of lead, but if you're drinking that water and you're washing up in it and all of that, over time you're going to have an impact. That was pretty much my testimony, was the health implications for being exposed over a long period of time to a certain amount of exposure. And then lastly, I attended the public health conference in Lancaster, and that was during Public Health Week, the first week of April, and there were a number of different presentations. I went to different workshops, and I learned about all of the different things that are happening in Pennsylvania when it comes to public health, and how, I just couldn't wait to bring all of this information back to my students in the form of assignments, case studies, and just discussions overall, and they were really fascinated. With all of the different things that I have been doing, I bring it back to them, and they're really excited. When I was doing the testimony, I let them know that I was going to testify. They were so excited. They wanted to know the outcome. They wanted to know what happened. They wanted to know what we were going to do about it. They were just really, excited and also passionate about what's happening in the world around them and what's happening with the health of different communities and how they can actually make a difference eventually when they finish their program and they continue on to do what they want to do professionally. So, just the outcomes of it, all the information is integrated in my courses, my topics, added to the readings. I have some additional readings for them now, activities that they can do in class. And now they have the most up-to-date, and I can stay up-to-date in the information that I'm giving them, and they directly benefit. I'm also able to make connections with program staff as I go out who are interested in working with students for experiential opportunities. Public health professionals are always happy to speak to students, so I have guest speakers on, lined up. And just overall, these events are valuable to my professional development as a public health professional and as faculty, helping students to train them in public health, and they're able to directly benefit from all that I do, whether it's in the classroom and outside. Thank you.
Hi folks, my name's Wayne Brew. I am assistant professor of geography here at the college. I've been here 16 years, and one of my great discoveries along the way was finding out about a group that actually has the same passions that I do. I didn't know if anyone had the exact same things. Oh, sorry. I do not like mics. I apologize for that. And standing behind a podium, I just want to start dancing around. And so years ago, I found a group. They called themselves Pioneer America Society. We did change our name recently because at times I would get emails asking if we were a neo-Nazi group or something to that effect. But the group started off by in the 60s by looking at the cultural landscapes and understanding that a lot of stuff was disappearing very quickly. And so a lot of the things that our group does is historic preservation and preservation of buildings, and they were especially concerned about log structures and also barns, rural landscapes that were being gobbled up, and that's where the organization got it started. But over the years it's evolved, and when we came up with a new name for it, and I became a director of it about 6 years ago, I guess, the name is a bit the handle, but it does a much better job of explaining what we try to do. Although we did it before ISIL was a term, and the beginning of our thing is ISIL, so now I'm afraid we're probably on the terrorist organization for ISIL PMC. It is a mouthful. What I just wanted to share with you is that this is a big tent organization. So we have historians, we have a lot of geographers, we have folklorists, we have people that study cemeteries and the landscapes of cemeteries. We have historic preservationists, museum people. So it's a big tent organization, although we're not a very large organization. So when we meet every year, it's not a huge group, and we all know each other after a while. I know my colleague Sam Wallace has been able to attend a few of them. He could probably give you a better idea what they're like than me. I'm kind of biased about it. But I just wanted to share that with you. We do have a peer-reviewed journal that's, I forgot to mention anthropologists too are part of our group. But we have a peer-reviewed journal. It's referred to as Material Culture. I'm bragging here. This is the one where I got published in, and my picture made the front. It's a picture of a church at an army base and the tower was built by Italian war prisoners during World War II, which is actually more common than you think it is. The more research I did, the more I understood that. We have our journal now with our new name on it. This is the most current one. This is peer-reviewed. But most of what I do is really, it's hard for me to refer to it as scholarship as much as documentation, documenting landscapes that are disappearing. And so that we find that we could do that really well on our website through a journal that we refer to as PAST. Let me dig it up here. I am so mouse-centric. It's hard for me to... Could I allow this? Will I crash it? And over the years, this is not a peer-reviewed journal, but it is edited. And what's great about this journal is that the fact that it is online, a lot of what we do is images, documenting through images. And so this allows us to do that. The other thing that I find really handy about this website is that you could embed links into it, which allow you to go to websites to show older images of things and the change that occurred without going through months of getting permission to use that photo in a journal, more like a journal setting. And the current project I'm working on is, let me get to it, sorry. I've been working on this. This is a summer project for the last few years. I've been tracing out old Interstate Route 11. And Interstate 11, I grew up near it, and so I've always been interested in it. But it's one of the, I think it's the 23rd longest highway in the United States. And this is part of the old interstate system, not the one that you think of with the limited access. And so what I find really interesting about driving along these old interstates is that they didn't start off as interstates. They were roads connecting county seats. And then they were designated by the federal government and upgraded through a 50-50 program where 50% was paid by the state, 50% by the federal government. And so these roads have multiple layers of landscape. What I mean by landscape is the material culture that you could see, visible culture that humans make. And so it makes it really interesting for me to kind of look and try to peel back these layers and document exactly what's seeing there, the changes that have occurred. Because the old interstate systems were set up in the 1920s. It was later in the 50s that the interstate system that many of us are familiar with, the limited access one. And so there's many layers of history that goes back here. I'm going to try to scroll down here. I started off, this highway goes from literally, I call it the French Connection because it goes literally from the border of Quebec and New York State all the way down to New Orleans. And so, and then I have, this is the first article. The sequel is the French Connection 2, of course, right? I don't know what I'm going to do with the third one when I do it this summer. My last leg of it is going from Knoxville to New Orleans, and I didn't say it right, Nolens, sorry. And I don't think there was a French Connection 3, if I remember correctly. But I just have a brief history of the interstate, and then we could start peeling back the layers. There's things along interstates that are from the 19th century. These are house styles that would be found in those periods of time because these were old back roads. Get a nice little octagon building here. And that's what I love about this journal the most, is that you could have a lot of images in it. And then you could go to the 20th century, the 1920s, the 1950s, and so on and so forth with the mid-century modern. You also get how the new interstates affect the old interstates. And this one here converted itself from Route 81 parallels Route 11 for great distances. And some of the stuff that I love to study is old diners. The first steel diner I found on Route 11 was in Pennsylvania, coming from the New York State border. But the signs are just wonderful. Love documenting the old signs before they disappear. That's really what, like I said, it's hard to call this scholarship. It's more documentation of what's there at the moment. I have a great affinity for gas stations and what they've become. I think some of the more interesting ones I found is the one that's a lawyer's office right here, that one that's, you could do so much with that. And here's an old Pure Oil gas station, and this is more common than you think. There's actually one in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, where the old cottage-style gas stations they dispense ice cream now and water ice at this point instead of gasoline. There's a lot of monuments. We study monuments, and how am I on time? Oh, thank you. And so I need to wrap this up. Of course, in the north, we're finding Civil War Union soldiers But then when I was up in North, you find things like this. This is in upstate New York. Yeah, you find a little of the South there. And then you find language on the landscape. In New York, they're called subs, but when you get closer to Philadelphia, this is up in Scranton, you get into Nick's Hoagies. So on and so forth. I really appreciate you spending some time with me, allowing me to share some of my work. This one. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this one, I passed a Buddhist temple on Route 11, and then not too farther down the road in near Binghamton, I found this. This is the landscape of the new migrants on it. And yeah, the Rocket Center is, I'll leave it to your imagination, what goes on there.
It's got a laundromat.
It's got, yes, it does. Yeah, you got liquor, you got, yeah. Okay, I'll counterbalance that with the limp lizard. Thank you.
How does one follow the limp lizard? All right. So I am Amanda Davis-Gatchett, and today I will be presenting a co-authored book chapter that was published in an edited collection entitled Contemporary Studies of Sexuality and Communication. This book's aim was to combine accessible and conversational literature reviews in a topic area that related to sexuality and communication alongside a brief research case study. Oops. A quick shout out to my co-author and dear friend, Dr. Roger Davis-Gatchett, who is currently an assistant professor at Westchester University. Our chapter explores the same-sex marriage debate, particularly the rhetoric of conservative groups who oppose same-sex marriage through the lens of queer theory. A little background. In November of 2008, California voters narrowly passed ballot measure initiative Proposition 8, also known as the California Marriage Protection Act, by a margin of nearly 4.5%. Much like the similarly titled 1996 Defense of Marriage Act that was signed into federal law by then-President Bill Clinton, Prop 8 amended the California Constitution by defining marriage as a legal arrangement that could only exist between a man and a woman. Prop 8, which received the support of over 7 million voters at the polls, effectively overturned the California Supreme Court's 2008 decision that any ban on same-sex marriage was a violation of the state constitution. A record $73 million was spent both in support of and in opposition to Prop 8, making it the most expensive ballot initiative of its time. Now, you might think that the Supreme Court's 2015 decision regarding same-sex marriage renders questions about the legality of same-sex marriage moot. However, the battle over Prop 8 and other similar state initiatives demonstrates how same-sex marriage has become one of the most contentious public issues in the gay and lesbian community's struggle for equality and recognition. Some researchers who identify with the scholarly tradition known as queer theory have questioned whether or not same-sex marriage has been a useful goal. Since the aim of our book chapter was to explain the basics of queer theory and in an accessible way for an undergraduate audience, Proposition 8 and the same-sex marriage debate was an ideal topic for exploring the theory's insights regarding the relationship between sexuality, gender, and communication, especially in light of the Supreme Court's 2015 decision. Although the term queer brings with it a long history of pejorative connotations, members of the LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community have effectively reclaimed the term as one of empowerment. One of queer theory's central objectives is to continuously destabilize the notion of a fixed sexual and gender identity. Queer theory's overt political stance differentiates the scholarship in this area from other more social scientific approaches to sexuality and communication. Queer theorists attempt not only to describe the complex relationship between sexuality and identity, but also change the ways in which we understand that relationship in ways that empower marginalized groups. Although queer theorists share a commitment to challenging normative understandings of sexuality, it is nearly impossible to offer a single description of the term queer or to provide a single example of how the term is used in the theoretical work that happens under the banner of queer theory. As queer theorist Nikki Sullivan succinctly puts it, queer studies is a discipline that refuses to be disciplined. Nonetheless, there is one central argument that theorists in the discipline have in common, namely that there is no natural relationship between anatomical equipment and what that equipment is supposed to mean in a given context. One prominent example of this kind of scholarship is the work of feminist and queer theorist Judith Butler and her critique of what she calls the heterosexual matrix, which is a binary framework of sex and gender. Butler argues that instead of being male or female in an essential or biological sense, we perform gender in ways that either challenge or conform to pre-existing cultural norms. So for example, the unconscious pull to dress in a certain way, if one is male or female, is an example of the types of performances that Butler describes and the types of performances that we do largely unconsciously every day. This theoretical stance has some really important political implications. Queer theorists' commitment to performances that challenge binary arrangements of sex and gender lead them to adopt a critical stance towards same-sex marriage, which is a position that on the surface might seem counterintuitive. Upon closer examination, however, this opposition to the institution of marriage is in itself in alignment with queer theory's broader critique of any system that preserves marginalization or oppression. As Michael Warner succinctly puts it, marriage sanctifies some couples at the expense of others. It is a selective legitimacy. Now, in our chapter, we ask, contrary to what queer theorists might argue, is it possible that same-sex marriage does in fact challenge this heterosexual, heteronormative matrix? And so to begin to answer these questions, let's return to our case study. The Protect Marriage Coalition is a coalition that included conservative political and social groups such as the California Family Alliance, Focus on the Family, and the Family Research Council. And it created a well-funded campaign in support of Proposition 8. And this campaign yielded a huge body of persuasive images and messages. And although the number of different conservative groups participated in the Prop 8 campaign, our case study focused primarily on the Protect Marriage Coalition and the LDS Church, which was the principal financial backer for Prop 8. Several themes emerge from the rhetoric of the Protect Marriage Coalition, but perhaps the most striking, and the discourse that I'll share here, is an expression of an intense fear that same-sex marriage will lead to a society in which the male-female gender binary no longer holds. For example, on its website, preservingmarriage.org, the LDS Church asserts that, quote, the legalization of same-sex marriage will likely erode the social identity, gender development, and moral character of children. The church also argues that when marriage is undermined by gender confusion and by distortions of its God-given meaning, the rising generation of children and youth will find it increasingly difficult to develop their natural identity as a man or a woman. In a video, Preserving Traditional Marriage, that was originally posted on the preservingmarriage.org site, a woman observes that voting for Prop 8 is the most important thing our generation will do because it will determine the structure of our society for the rest of our lives. And in a final example, the language of which ironically mirrors that of prominent queer theorist Judith Butler, in her critique of gender binaries and the heterosexual matrix, the woman states, "I feel voting for Prop 8 is important for my children's future. I don't want my children to grow up in a genderless society." Our case study offers several examples that suggest, at minimum, the proponents of Prop 8 believe that same-sex marriage will challenge, if not dismantle altogether, the heteronormative, heterosexual matrix that queer theory critiques. In our chapter, we argue that although same-sex marriage may not dismantle the structure of marriage, it does restructure it. And we argue that regardless of where one stands on this complex issue, queer theory offers a particularly useful framework for exploring gender, sexuality, and identity, and more importantly, how we as human actors communicate about those things in our daily lives and relationships.
Hi, I'm Deb Greenspan, and I'm here. I just wanted to describe to you a 3-day mindfulness retreat that we offered to Montgomery student veterans a couple weeks ago. And I thought that I'd just talk a little bit about what the retreat entailed, what we did, what we learned, and some of the highlights of the retreat. All right. So it took place just actually 2 weeks ago today, and it was at the Kirkridge Retreat Center in the Poconos. You can see a nice little picture of the grounds there. How? It was funded primarily through the foundation. Mike Brown, the director of the Veterans Resource Center, wrote a grant to the foundation, and it allowed 17 of Montco student veterans to participate in the 3-day retreat for free. So it was supported primarily by the foundation. We were also supported, though, by the Give Back Yoga Foundation in Guyam, which gave donated free yoga mats to all the participants at the retreat, as well as ESW, who allowed us to use the blocks and the straps for the yoga classes. So, which was really good because a lot of the participants had never practiced yoga before, so it made it a little bit easier, a little bit safer for them to practice yoga. And the college also paid, I should say, supported me to take an 8-week mindfulness course earlier this year. So the participants, as I said, we had space for 17 participants in the retreat when Mike sent out the email back in, I think it was February, announcing the retreat. It filled within a week, so it filled right away. Unfortunately, by the time we got the grant, or we got the grant money, the only weekend that was left for the retreat was the weekend before finals week. So when it came down to the week before finals, there was a little bit of a switch around. Unfortunately, we had a waiting list for the retreat, so we were able to fill in some of those spots, and we ended up having 14 students participate. I think it was 10 women and 10 men and 4 women. The facilitators were Mike Brown, of course, who wrote the grant, Anne Marie Donahue, myself, and Sarah Earlbaum, who is outside of the college, but she is certified in something called iRest meditation. So it's a meditation, a guided meditation that's been used exclusively for veterans, or particularly for veterans. And Sarah and I have been running yoga for veterans programs here at the college and in the county for about 5 years now. So our objectives were really to support the students' transition to academic and civilian life through connection, through mindfulness, and through marshmallows. So the connection, we had heard both from students here at the college, but really nationwide, that one of the issues in transitioning back was the sort of sense of isolation or disconnection, that they had really strong, powerful bonds in the military, and then when they came back, they felt a sense of isolation, as well as a sense of sort of disconnect from the students here because of past life experiences, because different levels of maturity. They had difficulties connecting with college students. So we really wanted to provide them with an opportunity to make those sort of connections again, to be able to have that sort of unspoken, uncensored, shared understanding that they have with one another, regardless of when they served or where they served or what branch they served in. So connection was a big part of what we did. Mindfulness was another big piece of what we did. We really wanted to introduce them to different practices, both formal and informal practices of mindfulness, and then marshmallows, because we quickly found out that the fire pit at night was where a lot of good stuff happened. So why mindfulness? There's a pretty, robust body of research out there supporting and showing that a regular mindfulness practice is associated with all sorts of benefits, both in the veteran and in the non-veteran population. It includes things like improved sleep, both the quantity and the quality of sleep, decreased levels of stress hormones like cortisol, improved ability to regulate emotions, to make the emotions more appropriate for the task at hand. Usually that's down-regulating strong emotion, and an increased ability to pay attention to sustain focus over time. So lots of different benefits to mindfulness, and we really wanted to kind of introduce them to those practices and have them practice those practices throughout the weekend. So I thought I'd just kind of share with you sort of how we incorporated mindfulness and connection and marshmallows into the weekend. So we started on Friday. We got a really nice warm welcome from the Kirk Ridge Retreat Center. And then we had dinner, of course, and went on to have a nice conversation about what our expectations were for the weekend, introduced each other to one another. We talked about what mindfulness is and what it is not, that it's not a relaxation technique, it's not emptying your mind of negative thoughts, that it's really just trying to be in the moment and sort of allowing whatever comes up, come up, and not try to push it away or judge what's ever coming up. We talked about routes to mindfulness and some of the different practices of mindfulness as well as the benefits. And then the fact that they already do this. A lot of them are really good at that focus piece that was part of their training and in many cases was necessary for their survival. The acceptance and the allowing was a little bit more challenging, so that was kind of a focus of our weekend. We did a yoga practice that night and a meditation practice that night. Really emphasized grounding and stability and centering, as well as kind of like finding, introducing them to different basic poses, alignment and safety in those poses. And then we ended the night at the fire pit, where the theme was really the perfect marshmallow, and trying to just break down some of the walls and some of the barriers and just have some nice, fun conversation. Saturday, we woke up quite early and we started in with different mindfulness and meditation techniques. We did a walking meditation, and that kind of segued into our hike, which was a nice long hike, in part because we got lost a little bit along the way, which was good, another bonding opportunity. And then we worked on some of the more informal mindful practices, like mindful habits, and what were some of the things that habitual ways of thinking, habitual ways of reacting, different triggers that they have, and how they can incorporate mindfulness into looking at perhaps disrupting the cycle of some of those unhealthy habits. We did a little bit of mindful eating, and really the emphasis here was you don't have to be on a yoga mat in order to practice mindfulness. You can just incorporate it into the things that you're already doing. So we did a mindful snack, and then played a little bit of mindful football. And then we did another yoga practice, and the theme on this one was compassion and connection. And we really sort of wove through this particular practice some of Dr. Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion and the elements of self-compassion and the importance of that for well-being. And then we worked through, or we had a prompt, a journaling exercise and a prompt, which was really, what are you ready to let go of? And then they kind of dispersed throughout the building and throughout the campus and spent some time on their own just journaling about this prompt. That night we had another fire pit, and everyone just kind of lined their chairs up around the fire pit, and we had a passage from the book, The Things They Carried. And at Anne Marie's recommendation, what we did was we all had the passage, and we went around this sort of semicircle, and everyone read a couple of the sentences as part of the passage, and then we discussed that, and it ended up being something that we discussed for a couple of hours, and they really talked a lot about the commonalities, their differences. They discussed their moments of strength and power and isolation and vulnerability. It was a really powerful evening. Sunday we did more yoga, and the theme here was strength and coherence and resiliency, and how to take some of those things off the mat and into their lives perhaps in a new way. And then bringing mindfulness home. How do you incorporate it into a home practice, something that you can do as part of your routine? And then what were some of their takeaway messages? So I wanted just to end by reading a couple of the quotes from some of the participants. The second day, I realized that yoga helps me breathe. When I do yoga, I can inhale fully, and more important, exhale fully. I've been stressed and anxious and generally on edge. I found that yoga helped me breathe, which then relaxed me. I have not found anything else that has the same effect. I am surprised that after a weekend retreat, I feel like a better person. But I do. I feel stronger and more capable of handling whatever comes next. I know that mindfulness and connections need to be part of my journey, and we joke about mindfulness, but we're talking about it. Just a couple more. We were introduced to so many tools, it'd be hard not to use more than a few of them. I was trying to figure out why this darn transition was so difficult. We talk about things that we all felt, and something clicked for me. I realized I was not alone. And finally, the sequence of events was vital to our connection being based on more than just shared veteran experiences. We built new common ground. So it was a really powerful weekend. I think as facilitators, it was inspiring, it was humbling. I think the participants really benefited from the retreat as well. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to do this work in the future. Thank you.
Okay, I'm mostly a Mac person, so if I struggle a little bit with the PC, you'll understand why that's happening. I'm Cheryl Gelliver, Associate Professor of Art. I've been teaching here for 14 years. And one of the questions that I get asked by other faculty members is, what exactly is scholarship in the visual arts? And one of the resources that is a good one is the College Art Association. Their mission statement is that they are the preeminent international leadership organization in the visual arts. They promote these arts and their understanding through advocacy, intellectual engagement, and a commitment to the diversity of practices and practitioners. One of the statements that I found on their website is that they believe faculty should have equal access to university support for research and professional development. And I'm very happy to say that in my 14 years here, I felt very supported. They define the idea of scholarship in the visual arts as a faculty member's commitment to his or her creative work. This could be the production of the work, expression of it, research, and it should be regarded as the same as that of academic practitioners in other disciplines. So there's your basic definition. I have a link here which I will not actually show, but if anyone wanted more information on the CAA, I could give you that link. They do say that exhibition and or peer-reviewed public presentation of creative work is to be regarded as analogous to publication in other fields. So again, a helpful definition. My recent creative work has focused on animation. And recently, with my co-director and co-animator, my husband, Tom Murray, we've been working on many music videos, and I'm starting to lose count of how many that there are, but the most recent are 4 animated music videos. This is one of the most recent. You can see on the left here how many stacks of paper animation starts to build. This one that I'm showing here is actually paint on paper, so there were many passes that we went through. Each color we had to go and photograph again. You can see on the right the animation stand that we're using. So each one of these pages has to be photographed. So that's, as you can imagine, very time-consuming. It would have maybe been a little bit easier to just paint on glass or use another technique where we can build up what we're doing under the camera. But after doing a test, we decided that we preferred the look of the black paper. It allows things to shift a little bit more and has a slightly different look to it. So more time-consuming, but more interesting looking. So as I said, my recent animation has focused on 4 animated music videos. 3 were stop motion, 2 were collage, 1 object animation, and actually there's one that we just started this past week that is object animation as well. As I said, I'm kind of losing count. And the one on black paper I just showed you. So each one was under 5 minutes. We shoot at 24 frames per second, so that means that each animation requires 24 frames, separate clicks of the camera to get 1 second of animation. And in my animation class, students are often very surprised at how slow going the process can be. I had a student recently during finals say to me, "Oh, it took me 8 hours to do this." And I thought, okay, you've got a little bit of a way to go there. So our animations have taken months to complete, and as I said, they're each under 5 minutes. So I have a couple of what we could call production stills here. On the left, this is one of my collage animations. You can see that there's a lot of tape involved. We decided we liked the look of the tape. This was from last summer. You can see I am left-handed, and I have my trusty X-Acto knife, and also we have our local blueberry farm, so there was a lot of blueberries going on, a lot of blueberry eating, and a lot of changing of the X-Acto knife, and I got quite good at being very careful not to confuse the blueberries with the knives, so that took a little bit of skill there. It felt at times that the cut pieces that I was using were really taking over the house, so that was another thing to go into different areas where I could find magazines that I was not charged for them, because we thought it was important in this piece to use pieces that were images that were part of the media, contemporary media. So we had quite a bit of stacks, and I can tell you places in Philadelphia where you can get magazines for 25 cents, or where you might find them at no charge at all as they're being discarded if you ever needed them. We discovered a little bit into the project that if we used baking trays, that was kind of helpful at organizing this mountain of cut paper that was taking over the house, so that helped a little bit. This is a production shot from one of our stop motion pieces, and you can see that they are also gilded, and basically gold paint is what I mean, not with actual gold. So the molding of the pieces, what you can see in each of the faces is that they are formed based on the consonant or the vowels in order to have each of these faces replicate the shape of the mouth that would be necessary to be able to have these little faces sing the song. So we spent a lot of time in our house, and it started to feel a little bit like a cave. So the next part of my presentation is really the exciting part, I think. I don't think you'd be too excited watching me work on an animation, but we had 2 animations that we finished, and they were in over 12 film festivals and related events over the past year. And this was really pretty exciting to be able to put all of these selection laurels up on our website and be able to share these. So these are a few of what we were included in the last year, the different film festivals. 3 of them were Academy Award winning, or I'm sorry, Academy Award qualifying. It would be nice to win one at some point, not yet. And some of them were also BAFTA qualifying, so that's the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. So we decided to kind of narrow our focus and think about what kind of budget we had to travel, and decided we were going to focus on the ones that were a little bit more prestigious. And one of the things I can say is that we did receive some funding here through the Pearlstein Grant, and I want to say thank you again to Michelle Cuomo, who was extremely helpful in putting forward that grant and helping us to get to London. The Rain Dance Film Festival happened in late September, kind of shaded into October. It was possible for us to attend a few days of that, and again, thanks to the support I received at the college, I was able to have my classes covered, which was very valuable. Here's a beautiful shot of rainy London, and I'm not saying that facetiously. I did expect that there would be rain in London. What I didn't quite expect was that there would also be foxes. So this is a shot of a fox in a London street in the rain. And here's one at Tibbitt's Vegetarian Restaurant. And actually, I was not there when this fox appeared, but the day after we ate dinner at Tibbitt's Vegetarian Restaurant, this fox was all over the news. So I don't know how the fox knew to go to a vegetarian restaurant, but it was very, very well cared for. And the waitress did try to serve the fox grapes, but apparently that was not to its liking. The other thing that I discovered was that foxes in London actually became kind of a thing. So if you wanted to take a look at this tweet, I won't spend time actually going to that page. You'll see that this gentleman mentioned that this whole idea of urban foxes adjusting to city life is utter nonsense. This one who boarded the bus with me didn't even have his Oyster card. And in case you guys didn't know, that's an Oyster card, very much like our Metro cards for New York City. So in my trips to London, I did see several foxes, but didn't ride a bus with one. This is another gentleman, a British gentleman, who fell asleep drunk at a bus stop and then was actually awakened by a fox tugging on his trousers. So this is a real thing. I'm going a little bit off subject here, but unless you're able to visit places, you're not going to be aware of certain things in the culture and have these kinds of experiences. So last semester I was not teaching animation because that class did not fill, but I was teaching painting. And I was able to come back and share the story of the foxes and also share that I was able to stay in a hotel at Trafalgar Square and visit the National Gallery, which was very relevant to the painting class that I was teaching. So I was able to share with them some of the artworks that I was able to see. And also, we had a discussion about how the National Gallery does not charge. So we have the Met Museum in New York City, but as we know, there are only certain times that students and the general public can go into the Philadelphia Museum of Art free of charge. So that was another cultural experience, understanding that there was much more support for the arts in Britain, and that there are many more places where one can go and enjoy art free of charge. The Rain Dance Film Festival was a real whirlwind, many different activities, and this is the invitation to the film festival closing. A lot of things happened before and after the screenings. So the closing was this red carpet event, which was very exciting to walk the red carpet, and also to drink champagne out of a plastic flute was very exciting as well. We went with a friend of ours who lives in London, and when I first picked up a plain plastic cup, he said, "Oh no, you have to have the flute." So he went to the table that had the flute-shaped plastic cup, so that made us feel like VIPs. We also were able at this festival to meet people who were able to see our films, and that becomes really valuable because there's so much on the internet nowadays that you would assume, okay, well, what's the point of attending a festival? People can see who made it into the festival, they can see your work. But we had some very interesting conversations that led to the possibility of us possibly doing a title sequence for a full-length feature film, and that's very exciting. We'll see how that goes. But these are the kinds of connections I was able to talk about, again, with my students to show up to art openings or wherever your art might be. I know I'm running out of time here, so this is a recent screening. I'll try to wrap up quickly. This is a still from that collage animation that I showed. And going from here, this is what I see when I'm creating my animation. To this was very exciting. This is the Aesthetica Short Film Festival that happened in York in the UK, and our still was chosen as one of the featured stills when they were advertising the event, so that was very exciting. I'll go through very quickly. This is a shot of York, UK, which is a beautiful town in the north of England, which I'd never been to before. Very exciting old cobblestone streets. The Yorkshire Museum, which had this beautiful event. Again, more opportunities for meeting other filmmakers and making connections. A master class by one of my favorite music video directors, Tim Pope. Unexpectedly very funny, which I had not expected. He did a whole presentation on how, as a young director, he had shopped in Carnaby Street for a lot of his wardrobe, and then some of the artists who he filmed in his music videos ended up wearing some of his wardrobe. So here's Neil Young wearing Tim Pope's shirt, and here's for children of the 90s, here you have a member of The Cure, Robert Smith, wearing one of Tim Pope's shirts. The London Short Film Festival is the last film festival that we went to over the break, the last of the three that were BAFTA or Academy Award winning or qualifying. You can see I have goals here to win that Academy Award. And one of the events that was very interesting was an evening party where they had a duo who presented zoetrope animation along with sound. And I had not really thought about animation used in this way. So again, being able to take this back to my classroom and say, do you know what's going on? This is kind of like a rave party, but they're projecting animation. And there's a link there that I won't click on. I'm ending now with a little bit closer to home. The Philadelphia Independent screening. I'm sitting next to Carl Staven, who's a professor at University of the Arts. And the gentleman holding the microphone is Chris McGee, who is also a professor of animation at University of the Arts. And being able to participate locally in these kinds of events helps us to strengthen our transfer ties. I have a student who is just leaving animation class now and is going to study with Carl Staven. So having these ties in the local community as well as going far abroad is really a very nice way to strengthen the programs that we are able to offer here, and I'm very proud of that. My last slide, I will not click on the link because I know I'm out of time, but there is a link if people are interested in seeing our animations. I would be happy to share that with you. It's 3 minutes. It's a 3-minute animation. Okay, so I'm given 3 minutes. Wonderful. This was shown at the faculty show, so if you are not in the habit of coming, I have to go ahead and say, come and join us at the Faculty Arts Center, in the Fine Arts Center at the faculty show, and I'm usually showing something there, but if you did want a link later on, I could share it with you. I don't know if we have the speaker on. Oh, here we do. Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening.
Well, I guess it's 12 o'clock. I can say good afternoon now. I want to talk to you very briefly about a paper that I presented at the Northeast Modern Language Association in 2013. It was part of a panel, a roundtable discussion. We were talking about specific ways to sort of keep our students engaged and when they don't read, and we all know they don't like to read. So as a result of that presentation, we were actually invited to present all of our papers, and they were published through Pedagogy, which is a I don't like microphones either, which is a peer review journal published by Duke University Press. Now, the reason that this started was because I teach African American literature among other courses, and I found that our students just simply were not familiar with the history of the period. They were not familiar with the authors, and while they know music, and while they know a little bit of poetry, they did not recognize the connection between these two. So I saw this as an opportunity to create an approach that could be used not only in my classroom, but could be also sort of used in other classrooms, as well as offer sort of a cross-disciplinary approach for teaching this particular class. What I specifically wanted to do was to have students, as I said, see that there's a connection between what has happened in the past and what is currently happening. Specifically, I wanted them to see how their love and emphasis on contemporary rap and hip hop is actually inspired by many of the artists who emerged during the Harlem Renaissance. Not just people like Langston Hughes, who they're always familiar with, but also Countee Cullen, as well as why does his name escape me now? Claude McKay, sorry. So I wanted them to see ways in which they could connect with the past. What I chose to focus on were two specific things: toast, as well as the lyrics of contemporary rap. Toast because it is an oral form, and it is something that was very common during the Harlem Renaissance, specifically addressing the idea of a new Negro. This was the person who emerged after Reconstruction to provide sort of a challenge to the sort of stereotypes that existed. And so you had this character, often an urban legend, who had this sort of powerful persona that was then created in this toast. One of the most famous ones is Shine and the Titanic, which we'll look at in a second. But what I wanted them to see is that what they see as the sort of rawness of contemporary hip hop is simply not that new. This is something that also happened during the 1920s and 1930s. And so with all of the things that are going on in the news with the Trayvon Martin, the police brutality, and these constant images being bombarded in terms of brutality against African American men in particular, I wanted them to see that the toast emerged during the 1920s for the exact same reason. There were images in the newspapers in terms of lynching. There were constant calls for racial oppression throughout this time period, and that's where the toast began to emerge. And so I wanted them to see this is nothing new. This is a way that we're continuing this particular dialogue. And so what I try to start off with is a specific sort of, I guess you could say, 3 objectives that I want to achieve in terms of this particular approach. First of all, I want them to see the African American male as heroic. After all, the new Negro is redefining this African American male. And we focus specifically on his intellectual ability. Because if, after all, coming from slavery, many of the African Americans were undereducated, so I wanted them to recognize there is still a high level of intellectual ability that these men and women have. I also want them to see that the toast, as well as the contemporary hip hop lyrics, are a form of artistic and social resistance. And I focus specifically on the toast to show them how we got to the point where there is a linear progression of what is actual protest in the 1920s, that continues into the 1950s, that continues today. And it's being addressed through artistry, not just simple social activism. And then finally, recognizing that art alone cannot and does not solve all of our problems. In the Harlem Renaissance, there were a number of writers, a number of cultural workers, as I sort of refer to them, who provided all types of approaches and ideas about improving things. However, they were not as successful as many of us would have hoped them to be. So we're revisiting this. So there were specific failures that took place during the Harlem Renaissance, and I want our students to see that many of our contemporary hip-hop artists are also pointing out some of the failures that are taking place today. As I mentioned before, I start off with the heroic African-American male, and I use the toast of Shine in the Titanic. If any of you are familiar with it, it basically is a character by the name of Shine who happens to be in the hull of the Titanic, and he recognizes that the ship is sinking. No one else does. He's in the hull or in the cargo area because he's African American. He comes to the captain, tells him what's going on. The captain is sort of indifferent to his responses, and this goes back and forth. But this goes to show, at least for my students, that then you had someone who was refusing to sort of accept this idea of I have no idea, I have no voice. I contrast that with the song lyrics by Mos Def, who writes about Blue Black Jack. And Blue Black Jack is actually Jack Johnson, who none of my students are aware of who he is, but he was one of the early African-American heavyweight champions who in many ways broke a lot of social barriers and is indeed the epitome of the new Negro. So when using this contemporary lyric, I give them an idea of some contemporary artist who's aware of their past and a way of integrating that into the class. This is the toast. I'm not going to go into it. I know we're running out of time, but this is the toast. But just to give you some idea, the students then start to look at each one of these lyrics and recognize not just the content, but also the artistry. Because I try to use this to also teach them about various literary elements and various poetic elements, and so this is a perfect way to do that. I contrast that with Blue Black Jack, the lyrics from Mos Def, and again, what you'll see here is the use of the refrain, and many of my students just sort of think, oh, he's just repeating it. But I start to ask them, why? What is the purpose of him repeating this? What is the point that he's trying to convey to his audience? And they start to recognize that. So from there, we move into artistic and social resistance. As I mentioned before, the students begin to recognize that there is indeed a parallel with what has happened in the past and what is happening today. And one of the things that I try to incorporate is the idea that art is always changing. It's evolving. It is not static. And what I show them in many ways is how Langston Hughes's poems, which they're often familiar with, are in the free verse manner, also can be contrasted with a Philadelphia group, The Roots, who some of them are very familiar with, in terms of what they discuss in their lyrics. The fact that The Roots is actually, I think it's at Jimmy Fallon's house band, amazes all of them because they're like, that's right, they are. I'm like, yeah, they really are. So they start to see the ways in which the artist has a tremendous amount of influence on political and social change, and specifically hip hop, which is often sort of maligned in many ways, okay? Then the last thing that I sort of focus on, how it is a social and political critique. During the Harlem Renaissance in particular, you had, I believe it is Claude McKay, who frequently used the sonnet, which is a very traditional, very structured type of poetry. But his critique was of social, traditional, Victorian values and approaches. So he could use the traditional standard form to still critique what he considered to be an obstacle to his life. The same way that Tupac Shakur is very critical in his piece, Black Cotton, about the failures of the Black arts movement. Tupac Shakur wrote a number of lyrics which are often sort of inflammatory. This does not happen to be one of them. So what I want you guys to see is that you can have these sort of adult conversations with your students. It's just a matter of focusing on those lyrics that reflect what it is that you're trying to achieve in your classroom. Now, last, in terms of what it was that I was hoping to accomplish in terms of not only this paper and this panel, but also in my classroom. Well, what I found out is that it really did promote some real collaborative learning and teaching on my part. I would actually have to contact friends of mine who teach at other universities to find out, well, are you familiar with the lyrics of so-and-so? Because I'm not familiar with them, and so that happened. I also found out that my students would actually go home, talk to their grandparents, talk to their parents, and ask them questions about, well, I know that you were around during the 50s and 60s, what was going on, and do you know anything about the Harlem Renaissance? And so there's this real cooperation that started to emerge in the classroom, and there was a lot more dialogue going on, and they were actually reading, which was always the objective to begin with. It also promoted and enhanced the ideas of various learning styles. All of our students have various strengths and weaknesses, and with this particular approach, it's a matter of sort of finding one that works for them. And there's so many different ones, they're going to hit on one that works for them. And last but not least is the idea of cross-discipline. I tried this at another college, not here, because it just hasn't worked out yet, but having other faculty members and other disciplines come in on a particular day to talk about a particular topic relevant to what we're doing on that day. It's a wonderful way to, first of all, foster collegiality here. It also allows our students to recognize this real connection that we have from one course to the next. They're not isolated. Regardless of what their major may or may not be, this is something that they can do, okay? And I think that's it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. You may not know me. Some of you do it. I was on TV once, no. I came over and watched a lot of this today, and I just want to tell you how impressed I am. The work that was done, the talent that you have, the passion that you have, it is contagious, it is inspiring. I sincerely hope that you take what you did today and continue to do this and expand it. It is not often that you get a chance to see the type of work that faculty do in this kind of a forum. I sincerely hope that this is not just a one-time thing, that this continues onward for a long time and it expands and we bring more people in. I didn't get to see every one of them. I was in the back, though, for quite a bit. And I just want to tell you, I'm amazingly impressed. I knew when I came here that we had outstanding faculty. I know it even more so now. So I just wanted to come and tell you how impressed I am with all of you, how much I appreciate all of the work that you do and all that you've done, and knowing that I am the only thing now between you and lunch, I will shut up and just tell you thank you for everything, and please go have lunch, okay?